Your mission is to display a graph of the flow through the first section, that is the pump station end, of the steel pumping main. Go on to display a graph of the water level in the source tank and then water level in the summit tank. To do that, in Hydraulics Results mode, you click on the Hydraulic Traces button. In this mode that browses hydraulic traces, you are able to click on any component, a node, pipe, tank, valve or pump station, and display traces of its real-time behavior. You control what traces you browse simply by clicking on Map Components. To demonstrate, I will click on the summit tank and look for a graph of its water level. Here is the water level graph. The other two parameters of tanks which are traced are outflow rate and percent full. The user needs to have specified the tank's full supply level for a percent full graph to be computed. Closing these traces and clicking on the source tank. We see the same three parameters graphed for the source tank. Note this button. It lets me switch between multiple graphs tiled onto the page and showing a single graph per page. For example, I can now use this button to step forward through each single graph, or use this button to step backward one graph at a time. Closing the source tank traces. I will now click on the next part of our mission, which is the first section of the steel pumping main. I need to see the pipe's flow rate trace. Switching out of tiled graphs. Scrolling through, I can see that the four parameters traced for pipes are flow rate, head loss, velocity, and head gradient. Closing that window. Let me show you the range of parameters traced for pump stations. Zooming in, reselecting hydraulic traces, and selecting the pump station we call Pump 1. Users have the ability to create multiple parallel pumps within pump stations. As a result, pump stations can have a large number of traces. That is where these two buttons become useful. They allow you to step forward one page of tiled traces at a time, or backward by one page of tiled traces. And you can also click here to go to the first trace, and here to go to the last trace. I will leave you to explore the parameters traced for pump stations, valves and nodes at your own pace. For now, let me point out the use of these buttons. This button you can use to customize the graphs, their grid lines, their graph line colors, their axis scales and labels, and then the format of fonts used for chart titles. This button resets graphs' axes scales to their default values. This button exports the graph values in a text file that can be read by spreadsheet software. This button copies the currently visible graph to the clipboard, allowing you to paste it into a report that you are writing. Closing those traces and clicking the Escape button. Note, in Hydraulic Traces mode, you must use the Escape button to leave Hydraulic Traces mode. But there is another way of displaying traces for a single component. You can select it with a right click and use the Trace menu to achieve the same browsing experience, but you do not need to escape out of this mode each time. And while we're here, the other menu choice, Values, lets you display a table of performance values for the selected component at the current simulated time step. And you can select other components to display their values. That's it for browsing time traces on the map.